Welcome to the Data Exchange podcast. Today, our host will be our managing editor, Jenn Webb, and our special guest is Sharon Zhou, who is, I guess, technically ABD, computer science at Stanford, all but dissertation, but you can also read it as all but defense, I guess. So take it away, Jenn Webb.
Thank you, Ben, and welcome, Sharon. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to start, I imagine this conversation will end up all over the place, but let's start talking about Edtech. When Ben brought this topic up, my mind went immediately to Coursera and Harvard X and online learning platforms like that. And then when I started researching for this conversation, I realized or discovered that it's so much more than that. So could you talk a little bit about the evolution of EdTech, how it got started? Like what was the first EdTech thing? And then sort of kind of up to now and where we are.
I can definitely touch on that. I think the first EdTech thing, depending on, the word technology can be all relative, were cave drawings, like drawings on caves to try to convey information. But if we're going to go into the information age a bit, I think the first online education was started at the University of Illinois in the 1960s, around 1960. And for some perspective, this is before the birth of the internet. Okay, so this is really early on. Students were just accessing information with these linked computer terminals. And then in more recent days, I think MIT began their online instruction somewhere around the early 2000s, 2002, and providing basically, like you said, Harvard X, but MIT, the online stuff, providing it free of charge to everyone. And within, I think, just 7 or 8 years, there were millions of students already taking at least one class online. And it started to grow more and more and more. And then platforms like Coursera start popping up, Duolingo in, I think, 2011. And they have over 300 million users now, which is crazy. And these are now sprouting out. And we realize that, they're independent platforms. They're separate from universities, but they're providing this world-class instruction still. But I would say that it's still not too different from how instruction's actually taught. It's just spreading how instruction can be accessible by millions of people, which is amazing because a lot of people don't have access. So it's democratizing who can access instruction, but it's not changing how we do instruction necessarily. And it's mainly just not really integrating with existing school systems because of the difficulties with doing that.
Right.
So that brings us to today.
But I imagine the pandemic played kind of a role in either driving it forward or maybe exposing some things that need to be driven forward. What has your experience been through the first year of the pandemic?
Oh, the pandemic has been an incredible force at exposing flaws in the education system. I think one of the biggest things is that, all of these schools now scrambled to find some platform. And actually, a lot of people went to Zoom, which was not designed for education, but, is just what people like, this is the dominant player in the space, let's just go use it now. And that kind of points at the I would say more risk aversion and discomfort with technology that a lot of these schools may have. But what I found really interesting about the pandemic was it started to bring to light, homeschooling a bit. And so people thinking about homeschooling platforms, and that market grew a lot. And I think it also brought to light things like Stanford or higher ed, where they're making money from tuition oftentimes, but that tuition is supposedly paying for these classes. And yet, is that where the students are deriving value? I don't think so, because we just said, it's all democratized. It's already on all these online platforms for free. So it's this really weird, we're not getting, the real value is these like in-person networks that these environments create. and it's not really the instruction, but that's where they're trying to get money from it. So I think it started to expose this instability and the lack of incentive alignment in the school system.
So
Yeah. And
I have a
go
couple
ahead,
of
Ben.
comments. I have a couple of comments. The first is, so there's the edtech platforms that came out of universities, but then there's also these edtech platforms that cater to professionals. So this not necessarily like what we call traditional quarter or semester classes. They could be like a few hours long, could be a few days long. So kind of that uh, what do you call it? Adult learning or continuous learning for professional development.
Yeah.
I think those platforms actually, I have some data that those platforms have grown a lot during the pandemic. Maybe because people have more time, they're not commuting. Um, and then secondly, I guess as Sharon points out, I think the universities are kind of in this bind because it's kind of being exposed that I guess their main value is the brand and credentialing and signaling. You know what I mean? Because basically, uh, what you're looking for is where did this person go to school more than what they actually did in school in some ways.
Yep. Hard to say we all did different things at school. It's hard to say that we did more at school than someone does on Coursera. I think it really was just the networks that you made in school and and I really want to stress this like peer-to-peer learning, I think was more or less, and the brand kind of giving you access to, let's say it's easier for a Stanford student to approach a Stanford professor and for that professor to respond. So I think there's a bit of that going on where you are now part of this group, and as this in group, you get additional access to things, and then that opens more doors. And I think that's really what universities give. And
Sharon, am I misremembering this? But I think I remember that when either Andrew and Peter Norvig and Sebastian, when they first started teaching this classes in Stanford, and they put it online. One, a lot of people from outside Stanford all over the world started watching these classes. But secondly, they also realized the Stanford students stopped coming to class. They just watched the classes from their dorm room.
That's great. As someone who notoriously skips classes.
So, Sharon, when we were talking about the effects of the pandemic and the flaws that opened up, it makes me think too about how like high schools and grade schools suddenly needed to have online learning, and they seem to be, if you look at the headlines, they seem to be flailing through that and not really succeeding at all. And it exposed a lot too of marginalizing kids in rural areas or low income families who don't have internet access and things like that. What do you know about maybe initiatives or approaches for dealing with those kinds of things, and how schools could maybe better prepare for this sort of thing should it happen again or continue on for an extended period?
Right. I brought this up actually to Andrew, who is my advisor, but also started Coursera at the very beginning of the pandemic, when I thought, wow, Netflix streaming is amazing. Why is streaming any other content not amazing? Why is entertainment so optimized? Can we get, educational content to be better? And they are actually very actively working on it and working on very specific ways to compress that information to make it very easy to stream and access by people who do not have great internet access. And what's actually a really great thing about it too is you don't necessarily, like in some cases you do need real-time instruction, and that is very challenging, I would say, because then streaming is just, you need higher bandwidth. But when it's asynchronous, when there's a video that's pre-recorded, it is slightly easier for people to access and be able to download and then watch in a place that's completely offline even.
So I guess one of my questions at a high level is, what are some of the key elements for an effective online learning platform? And as someone who teaches a popular course on Coursera, Sharon, so what's the difference if you were to teach that class in person versus Coursera? What are the differences?
So many differences. So if I were to teach it in person, I would use a whiteboard and probably not have to do as many takes. Well, actually, I only get one take, so I really don't have many more
Cut.
takes.
Class cut.
Let me do that again.
Back, everyone scrub back to the beginning of this video. Yeah, so I mean, I think it would have more room for mistakes, but also students would engage with me much more, right? They would maybe interrupt, ask questions, and then I would, veer the discussion towards what they want. And I think, I mean, that is honestly the ideal way of going about some kind of instruction, is one-on-one private tutoring kind of thing, or even if it's not necessarily one-on-one, having this classroom environment. But on the Coursera platform, I need to pre-record everything. And I do go through lots of alpha testing and beta testing phases with groups of students to figure out, what parts of this are accessible and understandable, what parts of this are really confusing, what can we improve on? And there are these iterative kind of different steps. But what's interesting is that it's never, that kind of real-time feedback. But what is really cool, though, I would say, is the Coursera course. When we got alpha testers, I didn't realize, and I spent a lot of time with the alpha testers, in Zoom meetings, blah, 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 talking to them and try to get feedback and try to develop a relationship. But what I didn't realize was the average age is not the same average age as your college student. Like, there were people who were already retired, for example, or, like in all stages of life, literally spanning the whole thing, like from college to non-college. And it was just fascinating to be able to engage with people at all walks of life with completely different experiences, who were experts in other areas. And I thought that part was really, really cool. But also makes the instruction a little bit more, I think, just different, not necessarily more challenging, but very different.
And is there anything that you've garnered through this past year, any changes you've made that turned out to be something really that was a big improvement, and that you'll keep doing going forward, regardless of the situation outside of the teaching?
Yeah, so I hope this answers your question, but something that I really wanted to do in my course was to make it very, very engaging and upbeat and as relevant as possible to students. And so our team literally created memes for the course. Like, they were homegrown, people took their dogs, did photo shoots with them, added meme tags. Like, it was very intense. But I've taken that to my Stanford course, which I'm also teaching, which is over Zoom. And I guess kind of more in person, more live. But I've taken that to kind of extreme. We have a memes page with lots of different memes for people to confirm their knowledge of, do you understand this concept? And can you confirm your knowledge of it, not by a test, but by laughing at memes? Like, if you find this funny, you understand this concept. And I just wonder if there are different forms of evaluation we can go through to help students get there without feeling the burden of, oh, I'm being assessed and judged. And I can instead see how this is relevant to me, to things I do today. I can connect it to dots like The Queen's Gambit was one that I kept connecting to, this Netflix show. Or can I think the next step I would love to see is to see instruction be democratized. So not just me, but, maybe I connect better to a lot of women in the field. And I've gotten that as feedback, like, oh my gosh, finally a woman who's teaching this. But not only that, like, the metaphors, the analogies you use are relevant to me. And I'm like, oh my God, fantastic, good. I also like shopping. I don't know. But, and then there's the other side of, I'm not going to cater to everyone either. So what about other people? Can we democratize instruction even more? And we're seeing this a little bit in TikTok, where there are videos of people doing makeup, but also talking about nuclear energy. And I love this. Like, there's a little bit of instruction going on with the social media aspect. So I wonder if there are ways to play into that a little bit more for instruction to be democratized and to be self-expressive.
Right.
So I
Ben,
have,
I was
yeah,
just going to say, Ben spends a lot of time working with social media stuff. So
yeah. So I think actually, one platform. I don't know, Sharon, how you feel about this, but let's set aside technological glitches, or let's say the user experience is smooth. Uh, One platform I think that already is doing a lot of instruction is actually Twitch, right?
Yes.
Right. So
Twitch.
can you see teaching a class on Twitch? Because Twitch, you also have all the stream of chats, and things like that. And I know that open source developer relations type people already go on Twitch to do pull requests, or just have sessions with users of their libraries and stuff like that. So why not take it to the next level and actually deliver instructional material?
I think that would be awesome. And I know a startup kind of doing this space and catering it more towards instruction. So enabling there to be, so I think Twitch is kind of like, oh, here's this like giant stream of everyone watching. Maybe there could be, groups where students can break off and they can watch the whole lecture together in their little pods, and then be able to, ask questions. And then that would surface up a question mark so the instructor can go into their little pod. So like a little bit added, a little bit added instruction, but I definitely think Twitch would be a really great platform for live instruction.
And then maybe, so what would be what do you think is the role of a TA in these platforms? Because the TA normally would have a discussion class or office hours or things like that. So when you have these platforms, can you also, I imagine in Coursera, right? So you would have people with slightly more credentials attending the class. Maybe they can serve as mentors to the other students, right?
Right, exactly. And that's what our mentors on Coursera do. And we promote people after they've been very helpful on our giant Slack org to other people to be mentors, essentially. And I would say my TAs in my class help me curate questions. So I can see if there's like a Twitch scenario there that would help with, they would curate and answer questions live, and whatever they can't answer, they would probably pop to me, or something that's popular, they would pop to me. And then also, when we get into breakout rooms, I very much appreciate them, going through each group of students and trying to answer their questions. And yeah.
Interesting. I wonder, Jen, do you think that do you think you would take a class like this? So Sharon teaches classes in computer science, but what about, I don't know, like in political science or classics? I wonder how effective these platforms are, because there, once you scale, you lose the intimacy of the discussion.
yeah,
Yeah.
I actually have a subscription to Coursera, and I've been using it for hobbies. So how to draw and how to paint, that kind of thing. And then there are I'm doing a Harvard X CS class. And I find it's, I'm old and I went to college a long time ago. But I find that it's more difficult it's weird because I've been working from home for so long, and I don't have a problem working from home. I don't have a problem with my work ethic or my drive to get work done or that kind of thing, but I can't seem to finish this Harvard X class. Like, it's just, it's too easy to say, well, they'll move that deadline out if I don't need it right now, so I better do this other thing instead. So I find it's a little bit more difficult to stay engaged with the class. Do you experience anything like that, Sharon? Like, what if you're looking at the platforms in general, I know we talked about some ideas from social media and keeping engagement like that, but is there anything about the platform or the tools in general that you would like to see evolve, something that would make your job easier?
I think the completion rate thing, don't feel bad. I don't think I've ever completed an online course. I don't think in my own course, to be honest. Like I am a completionist, but for some reason I just cannot do that. I think a lot of these videos or content need to be shorter form and also need to be somehow relevant to you. So if it's something in the direct line of both what you're very interested in and what you just, I mean, think about Netflix. People just like continue to watch the next season of Game of Thrones. How do you get someone to continue to do that? It's like they have to find it interesting. There needs to be some kind of engaging factor. And I think actually for Game of Thrones and some of the popular shows, there's also a social factor. So I think a big social factor plays into why people continue on to be part of some process. And I don't see that on a lot of these online platforms. You know, there are all these like randos that I don't know. Like, why am I going to hang out with them? But what if you could find people who you do engage with at an intellectual level for any of your classes, and you really love, you know, sharing what you've learned or what you've done, what you've created, and what you've made yours together. And I've seen this with one of my friends is a writer, and she does a lot of, you know, writing camps, and that's how they produce a lot of output is, you know, they get together all the time and they are intensely making sure that they have a certain page count or word count together every single week or several times a week kind of thing. And these writing boot camps get them, and it becomes a very social thing too. And they get to know each other, they get to know each other's writing, they help each other out. And so I think like that would be amazing. And if I think back to my college experience, and when I talk to other people about their experiences, that is what they remember the most. You know, oh, I did a problem set with these people and I learned so much because they thought of this answer at this angle and I thought of it at that angle, and we kind of all came together, and I ultimately got this really great holistic view of this problem, which I otherwise would have only gotten one perspective from the teacher. And I would probably think I know it, but I could only regurgitate back the exact way the teacher had stated it, but would not be able to generalize it in any other way. So I would like to see these platforms more social, because I think this could actually get you to go a little bit deeper. And then I would also like to see these platforms enable a bit more on the self-expressive side, meaning create a project that is like very you, instead of be like, do this one example that everyone always does.
Yeah.
Encourage you, you know, like do it, change it up a little bit, make it Jen. You know, what would that be? Literally just make it like one little thing. It's like, oh, I could do this, but make it purple. I don't know. You like purple. So like you just want like, but then you could really push it. And then once you get someone's curiosity that way, it's just, I mean, they're just going to go. Right. So, yeah.
Right.
You know, one of the things that I've thought about as I was preparing for this discussion is this notion of I think we're very much in the early days for many reasons, but one reason I can definitely cite is just discovery, right? So, for example, take what Sharon is teaching in Coursera, GANs. Why do we need so many different GANs classes? What if Sharon is the best teacher of GANs in the world? Why do we have to have different GANs courses? Why, you know? So in other words, there's only one Game of Thrones, right? So we don't need all these people teaching the same class in some way. So it's kind of bad to think about that from the professor's angle, but reality is you might have a master teacher for a topic, then you just watch that, and then you go to your professor for questions. I guess Sharon is like a Khan Academy at massive scale, right? So where you have the reverse classroom, everyone watches the same lecture, and then they go to the class to discuss it. But there might be one person who's the best presenter in this topic, right? I don't know. Maybe it's maybe that's going too extreme.
Well, I think it's an interesting thought, because I think if we were to think about, I like to think about this as like there's the content and then there's the style in terms of, and we think about this a lot in style transfer literature. Sorry if I'm just like superimposing that framework here, but the content is, it includes how the topic is being introduced, how it's being explained, and oftentimes there are like really good ways of how conveying that content. Like there are really good ways. Like, oh my gosh, Andrew Ng figured out, okay, he spent a really long time and a lot of effort on making it really, really understandable. But he spent that time doing that. No one should really reinvent the wheel. A lot of these you can, either just take or improve little, 1% on, like not much, just like take this. But I do think
or Sharon, is there any shame in teaching a class where you go, okay, watch Andrew's lectures and then we'll come back and then discuss it?
I don't think there's any shame, but of course, I think people do feel like, I think it's less shame, but I think people actually do feel like they want the students' attention. Like they want to be the owners of the students' attention, even though I would say the students themselves are like, no one owns our attention. Like Netflix does, come on. But I think there also is a stylistic component here. So I think like, okay, so there's great content, but what if someone just relates to you more, Ben? And maybe you add in like some little analogy that relates to your life and also a bunch of other people's lives over there. And they don't relate to Sharon or Andrew Ng. They relate to Ben. And so I think, like it's almost like how to engage your audience. And then here's this great content that exists. It already is explaining it really well. But why not add a little, little change, little permutation, little style element, a Ben style, and then benefy it, and now all of those people are suddenly 10x more engaged, because I really think it would be a 10x difference in terms of, okay, well, this person teaching it is very different from that person teaching it, just in all the little things that do add up. Because I think like at least when I was younger, that made a big difference in terms of who I liked as a teacher. And at the moment I liked someone as a teacher, I would learn more. And it was like, that's kind of stupid and really random, by the way. But I do think that element does play in. So I would like to see more styles of instructors, but maybe the content, because it is actually quite challenging to figure out, what works and what doesn't. Like we had this giant team, right? And our team for the GANs course, like cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce. And I don't expect people, no individual should spend that much each time doing this. And so I think if people were more open to be like, oh, just grab, like I would be like, Ben, grab my content now, go make it yours in some way. Then I think that would enable, I think that would enable the wider spread of a
sort of open sourcing education. Yeah, because that's the commodity, right? That's the golden nugget is the content itself, and then the secondary layer is the presentation or the entertainment value, the style. That's interesting. What are your thoughts on that, Jen?
And actually, I don't know if this is still the case, but for example, Khan Academy, I think their videos are on YouTube.
Yeah.
And in principle, you can take that a sequence of those videos and teach a class, but then as Sharon points out, make it your own so that the students still identify with you. It's almost like the video becomes a textbook in some ways.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. So maybe the Coursera courseware that Sharon developed on GANs becomes kind of your textbook, and then you still meet the students. You still have a class, but read this chapter or watch this segment. By the way, I'd be interested what you guys think about this, but what is the ideal length for a module?
15 seconds. No, all right, that's dictated by TikTok.
TikTok, yeah.
Or I forget what Twitter's character count is.
240 characters. Yes.
Twitter for non-brands, the maximum video is 2 minutes 20 seconds.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, fascinating. Yeah. So the videos that I've been putting together have been, we try to aim for 5 to 10 minutes.
Wow, that's I was thinking more in the order of 15, because that's like a TED talk.
The 15-minute videos always get criticized for being too long.
Really? Wow. Jen,
Yeah,
what do you think?
everything in my all the modules and everything I'm learning right now are somewhere between 4 and 6 minutes even. And it's funny because once they start hitting like 7, you can really feel the difference. Like it does start feeling like, really, are we done yet? Like, come on.
So let's Jen, let's talk to Sharon now about her research in GANs.
Yeah, I was really interested in, there's a lot of stuff you're working on in regard to like climate change and healthcare. And so talk to us a little bit about what you're interested in and what's exciting going on right now.
And give us first a TikTok definition of GANs, which means 15 seconds.
All right. So a GAN it stands for generative adversarial network. And the generative part, so I can just break it down. Generative part basically means it generates things. So it's trying to, let's see, generate pictures of human faces or golden retrievers or I don't know, some other, a video, a text segment, an audio segment, something. It's just trying to generate something, okay? And then the adversarial part is actually how it goes about generating those things. And it goes about that. So adversarial means adversary or opponents. So there are 2 components of the GAN, and they're networks. So that just stands for neural network. And these 2 components are just fighting it out. They're adversarial. Okay. So it's kind of like 2 chess players, and they get better and better over time. And one of them is trying to generate this fake stuff that looks like the real stuff, but it never gets to see the real stuff. All it gets is feedback back from the other model, its adversary, that's trying to inspect what's real and what's fake. So it's through this battle of like, I'm trying to fool you, and I figured out you were wrong or you were fake and not real, that these 2 models learn from each other. These 2 networks learn from each other as adversaries. And one of them gets really good at generating fake things that look very realistic. And as a result, that's how we generate something that looks real. But in the beginning, let me tell you, it just generates pure randomness, like looks like TV static. Like it looks like nothing, okay? So, but then it gets really good over time by getting that feedback back from its opponent. It's kind of like chess if you think about it. You know, you like learn from your opponent in a way, and you try to build, and you try to maybe trick your opponent in some way. But you both get better over time as players.
And so talk about some of the practical applications that, and some of the really significant applications that you've been studying and working on.
Yeah, so I think GANs can be applied in a lot of different places. I think at a very basic level in terms of the technology, it enables some sort of anonymity. And anonymity, and it's able to hallucinate possible scenarios of the future or possible futures, possible scenarios. And it's able to generate new content, and it's able to allow you to edit existing content. And so that's like at a base level, it's able to do all these things. And it's had a lot of success in images and videos, also has gains in text and audio. But a lot of these kind of underlying applications, I would say, are double-edged swords. So they can be used to help or harm. For example, anonymity, very much a double-edged sword, where you can see it can protect people's identities, but it could also harm people, because a lot of platforms that enable anonymous chat are kind of toxic environments. So they are double-edged swords. And so I've been looking into, in my research, how to evaluate GAN, so how to assess whether a GAN can be used safely, or whether it can be used at all, whether it's better than another GAN. But I've also been looking at how to apply them both to medicine and to climate change. So for climate change, there's a kind of a fun application, and we are hallucinating kind of street view images of anyone's house, your neighborhood, whatever, at certain degrees of warming under climate change and what it would look like under a flooding.
And this is fun?
Where you live. Whether that's fun or not.
What if I'm in Miami, right? So,
Yeah, that's
I'm
not fun.
sorry
then.
again. I apologize. I invited you. Yeah, so I mean, it's enable, like all these graphs we use for climate change don't work on people. They don't even work on me. I look at a graph and I'm like, oh, I'm scared. Like that doesn't work that much, right? It's a number, it's a graph, but visually seeing what that means does add another layer in terms of climate communications and does make people viscerally feel the effects of this change. So that's one, like that's the hallucinating kind of imagining new scenarios kind of application. And then on the healthcare side, where healthcare is notoriously, well, in the US at least, is difficult to work with because we have a lot of privacy rules and because we have things with, and that results in lack of interinstitutional data sharing. And so we want to make sure we have very small data sets. So these small data sets have issues because they're going to be highly biased. And bias can mean, okay, bias, like the type of people coming in, getting scans, but also biased in that there are fewer cancer cases than non-cancer cases. So the types of scans, CT scans, for example, that we're going to get, or biopsies we're going to get in our intestines are going to be more skewed towards the negatives. We could get more positive data if we cause more cancer in people, but let's not do that. Instead, what if we can generate synthetic data that is of that to account for this data imbalance? So we can generate synthetic data of that positive class, and then we can use that to train a downstream model to help with this data imbalance and data shortage issue. And then the last thing that GANs are useful in healthcare that we're exploring is looking into differential privacy, which is basically, can we, instead of releasing data set of real patients' data, can we instead release a data set of fake patients' data that models the real, but that despite how much you try to attack it, will have bounds on how much information you can actually get. So you might remember the Netflix challenge where they're like, hey, figure out like cool stuff for us. And then people like attacked it and were able to find people's addresses and like identify people and everything. Well, this is trying to prevent that from happening, prevent you from being able to tell, hey, this person has cancer, for example. So
So a couple of things come to mind. The first one is, Sharon, are there day-to-day applications of GANs? How, for example, for speech recognition, you have Siri and Alexa. So is there the equivalent everyday app for GANs?
Yes, your TikTok filters, your Snapchat filters. Those are more or less, a lot of them are GAN powered. Yeah.
And then secondly, so did I hear you in that is there kind of the equivalent movement among GAN researchers for developing responsible GANs?
Yes, or I should hope so. Or maybe I'm leading that charge. I don't know. Yes, because GANs are very much used for, I would say, misinformation. And that is a huge, huge issue. I would say that it's not always a GAN that's underlying the issue. Like oftentimes when I look more closely, it's not, but it very much is towards that theme of we can now hallucinate or you can puppet anyone else's face. And that's really bad. That gets at a lot of different issues. And we were very, very worried about this with the election. I didn't see anything come out that was very, that caused so much disruption. But a lot of generative text models, for example, if we're going to look at the whole family of generative models for a bit, we're creating those articles that were that were alternate facts, so to speak, like were fake news. And so that is super concerning, because then we can churn out this type of fake news very quickly, and in a very diverse way, and then just be able to test it with people. And I think that is very, very dangerous. And we've already seen that, plus the algorithms that try to optimize for attention do not work well together. They just do not work well together, because they exploit one part of human nature that like both like sensationalism, or is more captured by sensationalism, and like is engaged by it, plus that has some kind of monetary value for that company. And that does not end well in terms of polarization. So, yeah.
Yeah, that clickbait stuff.
Yeah.
So can the GANs be applied backwards? So let's say, people are making these deep fakes or this misinformation. Can then GANs be designed to go identify that and fight against it?
Yeah, so they are being used for deepfake detection. So basically, one of the best methods right now for deepfake detection is to train a bunch of GANs that could possibly be used for any kind of misinformation, and use that to start detecting, where, oh, this looks like it's from a GAN. Okay, this looks like it's like me. Like one of the GANs will be like, that looks like it's from me. It's like, okay, well, that means there's something wrong here. And there are all sorts of different techniques coming out. There was this really interesting one. Apparently, our images have certain biological signatures due to our heartbeat. And so there was like the heartbeat detection of, I thought it was fake, I swear. But there were 2 papers on it. And so you can kind of get some of those signals from the image, and a GAN generated one will most likely not have that signature. Of course, now that we know this, people can then try to encourage their GAN to also generate that. So I mean, it's like this, it's the usual attack defense kind of mechanism.
Sure.
Where both of them are going to evolve, and we're going to have to evolve both of them. I mean, we're going to have to evolve defenses, because the attacks are going to evolve as well.
That's the same thing in cybersecurity. Sorry, Ben, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say exactly what you were saying, Jen, which is basically in cybersecurity, you have levels of sophistication, right? You have the script kiddies, which I imagine there's now the equivalent in GANs, because there's all this free software and code that anyone who can write simple Python can run. And then you have nation states who can develop really sophisticated models. But and then, of course, Sharon is training a bunch of people to build their own GANs. So some of them can be white hat, but who knows? Some of them could be black hats, right?
They're all forced to sign this Hippocratic oath. So we shall see who breaks it, and I will go after them with fire. Well, yeah, so that is very dangerous. I will say I'm actually less concerned about GANs directly being used and saying like, hey, this is real, when it's actually fake. Like, I'm actually less concerned about that than actually the models that are being used right now that we know they're fake, and they say we're fake, but they still impact people. And I think there needs to be regulation around this. And so one example of this is, and this was during the presidential campaign, there was a school shooting, and this 17-year-old minor was unfortunately killed in that shooting. And his parents actually resurrected him in using a GAN to give a essentially talk to students or other kids to be like, be careful, this is why, gun violence is so dangerous. And I think there's a little bit of a gray line there, because we know it's fake, right? It says like this person was killed, whatever. I mean, it's really intense. and technically the guy was a minor, so his parents technically can do, have legal authority over his like certain things about him. And so there's this gray area, I think, that we need to think about. Like, even if we know these are fake, what kind of regulation is there going to be around that? It's still going to impact people in a very emotional way, similar to if it weren't fake almost. And so I think it's interesting in that we need to like think about this a little bit more in terms of what we're okay with as a society and what we're not okay with, and what what constitutes like going over the line. And I think like that area is much less explored because we think that right now, oh, I mean, if they say it's fake, at least they're not like being super deceptive. Like, oh, it actually has like emotional impact on people. So maybe we should think about what goes on there.
And psychological impacts too. Ben's friend Sam Wang could talk to that. That's interesting. Ben,
Yeah.
what are you thinking about over there?
No, I mean, I think that when she was describing this incident, it reminds me that actually one popular disinformation vector, especially on the more conservative right-wing side of the house, is the notion of crisis actors, right? So you'd have a school shooting, and then someone will claim those are not real shootings; those were actors. So, but now it seems like with this technology, there might be added confusion in terms of because basically, if someone can recreate someone who's already passed away, and someone can claim they're not really dead,
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so let's close, Jen, with speculating on one thing which I'm obsessed with, which is the future of higher education. So 10 years from now, we know that the top brands, MIT, Stanford, Harvard, will still be around. But what happens to the liberal arts colleges that are maybe in the middle? Will they still be around?
And state schools and stuff like that.
Yeah, state schools might be, because basically they have a mission. But what about I mean, 4-year liberal arts colleges that cost roughly in the same ballpark as some of these really really elite schools? So I think that personally, I think they're somewhat in trouble. But I'd like to hear what you folks think about that.
I am really excited about Lambda schools, and I wonder if some of those schools, or like the Lambda framework, and what it is that instead of paying for school, it's free, and you only pay them if you can get a job right after, and you pay them like, I don't know, some percentage of your salary.
Clearly a concept that the computer scientists or mathematicians came up with, given the name.
100%, yes. and I think also the concept itself is very much computer science, because you can immediately get a job right after you learn how to code. And so I wonder if some of these schools can take that, but to a long-term kind of vision. And I think I've been thinking about this, but I know it's really hard to like sign a contract and say like, in 10 years, my blah, blah, blah will be percentage of whatever the school. But I do wonder if that incentive could be there in some way, or somehow play in to free education, but also just pay back once. Like, we want to align our incentives as a school so that you can be successful in your careers, and so that you can get some kind of money. Because I think it is challenging in some of the creative areas to earn money immediately. But at 10 years out, I think there's some statistics on how like right after college, the highest earners are from WPI, Worcester Polytech Institute. So like all technical people graduating, and MIT is up there. But Harvard is pretty is like kind of low relative. But then after 10 years, when all the Harvard students become managers, like it does, like immediately that becomes a different ranking. So I don't know. I wonder if there are different models there that align incentives with the students a bit more.
So Jen, what do you think? 10 years from now, the top 4-year liberal arts colleges.
Yeah, I agree that I think they probably are in trouble, but I like Sharon's idea of, the free college concept. I think we really need to realize that in this country, not just for education purposes, but for the benefit of our society and the growth of our society in general. I think one of our biggest problems right now is a lack of education. And when there's, plenty of accessibility, but not affordability. And it's an interesting concept to say, when you get hired after school, a certain percentage of your income will then go to pay for the college. And I like it as a percentage like that, because in liberal arts, we don't pay teachers, for example, that much. So if you go to school to become a teacher, your salary is not going to compete against an engineer. So, paying less for your degree would make sense, right? So I like the percentage. And, in my case, I'm still paying my student loans off. I'm 50 years old. I'm still paying my student loans off. And, that kind of thing, I think, needs to maybe be replaced by a better system.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
the question is, if these colleges need so much money because they have to maintain these elegant campuses, and Sharon is able to deliver those classes online for the most part.
Yes.
Yeah, so how do it becomes harder to justify, and then the employers start accepting, let's say 10 years from now, employers start really taking seriously degrees from these online learning platforms. That's another challenge for these colleges, right? So
right. Or that the colleges figure out maybe how to better monetize their online platforms. And so, Sharon, do you think that in-person learning, are these campuses going, I know in 10 years, probably, certainly, but longer term, do you think that learning is going to transition completely over to a digital platform, or will there always be a Harvard to go to?
I think that would be a slow transition, but I can see some people, definitely some subset, go completely online. Because when I observe my younger sister, she purely meets friends that are just purely online friends, and they like only engage online, and they never need to meet in person. And so I just realized that there are more and more experiences that are only hosted in a virtual ecosystem, and where you can have maybe even just a lot of different identities in a sense, like in person, and let different parts of your personality come out. And I think there will be cases where it can be purely online and you can still get a really, not only really enriching experience, but I think you get certain aspects of it that you cannot get in person. And I think that would be really cool. Like you can meet people who really match to you in your level that you just cannot meet in person. I think that would be incredible. And you can, maybe it removes, I don't know, some kind of other weird, social hierarchy thing that you get in the in-person that people don't like. And instead, this online experience is more wholesome that way, and it's more geared towards learning. So I think it's possible, but I think it'll be a different experience.
yeah, and I think I go into this discussion with the assumption that the elite schools are going to be safe because of the branding. Because in many ways those brands are probably just as valuable as other brands like Apple or whatever, right? So the elite schools definitely have worldwide name recognition, so they're safe. But everyone else is kind of has to operate and justify and figure out how to move forward when there's so many alternatives now. I mean, honestly, in the tech sector, sure, if you're from the elite schools, people pay attention to that. But I mean, there's a lot of people who don't have degrees, right? So
yeah, it doesn't super matter, I think, in tech. I think as long as, and I think I've seen during the pandemic, a lot of schools shut down, a lot of small liberal arts colleges shut down. And so it is happening. Like that was enough of a force to just shut down a lot of these schools. And I think as long as, so I like the idea of the whole Lambda school thing, but as long as that doesn't evolve into indentured servitude, because I can see how that can go towards something kind of dangerous like that, which how I, by the way, view the PhD program.
it is.
So I don't know, like as long as we're not veering towards that would be kind of nice.
Right.
I would not want to impose that on other people.
Right. Well, all right. What a fascinating discussion. I guess with that, we'll close. Thank you so much, Sharon, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.